Please ensure you have read and understood all instructions on the screen before undertaking this job. Start by parking the vehicle on flat, level ground with the handbrake applied. Turn the vehicle off and ensure both front and rear wheels are suitably chocked and the vehicle is safely secured before proceeding. What's up guys, today we're going to be installing the Mazda BT50 and Isuzu D-Max 2021 onwards diff drop kit. So first things first, you're going to need to remove any underbody protection the vehicle's got, whether it's factory or aftermarket. Whether you're doing this on the hoist or even on the ground at home, you're going to need to support the actual diff housing itself. Obviously we're going to be using the full big jack stand here. If you're doing it on the floor, you can use a jack stand or your trolley jack. Makes it super easy just to keep that diff from falling too low or anything like that, causing damage to your CVs. So now the diff's supported, we're going to start by undoing your big main bolt here that connects the diff to this cross member here, and then your two larger bolts that are up on your chassis rails right up inside above your CVs. Now all those larger bolts are removed, we can remove these four cross member bolts and completely drop this cross member away so we can install the lower diff mount. Depending on how worn your diff bush is here when installing this kit, this washer and rubber washer may fall out. Now what that is designed to do is stop this bolt and crush tube pulling through this bush here in the lower mount of the diff. So you must retain these because they will go on the new kit as well. So now the cross member's gone, we can remove this lower mount here which is bolted up to the diff housing itself. We can drop that away and get ready to install our drop superior bracket. So again, you're gonna have to retain this washer and the rubber washer off the top of this bush. If your vehicle's very, very new, you may need to knock this bolt out of here using like a punch, hammer and socket, anything like that you can use to remove that out of there, as we're gonna retain this bolt as well. Now all the factory stuff's removed, we're gonna start installing our superior diff drop. Now with all of these bolts, being that is a diff, and if this thing comes out loose, it's gonna cause a whole bunch of damage. I'm gonna be using Loctite 263, the heavy duty stuff, on all these threads that connect the diff to the chassis, make sure it does not go anywhere. Now you've got this lower mount bolted in, you're gonna wanna get the tension wrench onto it because obviously once this cross member goes back in, you're not gonna be able to get to it. So get in, torque that up to the spec shown on screen, that way it's not gonna move later on. Now we've got the lower mount all installed, the factory bolt just sitting there hanging on. We're gonna lower this diff down so we can get access to the chassis above the two side mounts of the diff above your CVs and slip in our side chassis plates with their retaining bolts as well. So as this is a 2021 onwards model, you're gonna use these outer chassis plates on both sides of the diff, and it's got three holes here at the back side of it. What you're gonna do is use these little cap screws. They're gonna go in there, and that is a locator pin that slots up into a hole that's in the chassis. Just be careful, sometimes these don't line up, purely for the fact that these chassis are all pressed steel and then laser cut prior to getting pressed. So those holes can have tiny little tolerances out between those, and unfortunately that's just a manufacturing issue, or it's not really an issue, it's just something that happens with manufacturing of a chassis rail. So you may need to shave the sides of these bolts down, but it's a very rare case that you have to. Now we're gonna get to slotting these plates up in between the outer diff mounts to the chassis. So you're gonna have to lower the diff down a fair bit to obviously slot this in. You've got a pretty thick bit there to drop it down. What you're gonna do is just, once you get it up into the location, just slot it around until this locator pin locks into place, line the bolt holes up, and you're good to go. Now with our diff drop kit, it actually pushes your diff forward 20 mil as well. That's obviously the difference in these holes. So what you're now doing, your diff mounts that were mounted to the chassis, they're getting mounted into these threaded forward holes in the plate, and that's gonna mount the diff to this plate. And then this back bolt, where you're gonna be using these big cap screws, slots up inside the plate, and that bolts into your chassis rail, attaching it to the chassis. Now, this is a floating nut inside the chassis rail. Unfortunately, it's not captive or welded like it would be really nice to be. So this can be a little bit fiddly to get it in there and get it to locate. Maybe a magnet can't help in that sort of thing, but you can realign it. It's just something to keep an eye out for, as they're a floating knot, not a captive nut. Now we've got the chassis plates and your lower diff mount here all installed with Loctite and torque to spec. Got to drop the tail shaft out, so you can drop in our tail shaft spacer just to make sure you've still got that factory length in your slip, and we're good to get this all buttoned back up and get the crossmember back in. So with your tail shaft spacer, we've got this machined surface that sticks up from the main flat part here. That is going to go in and locate in to your pinion yoke on your front diff. Then your drive shaft again has that same recess cut into it. That's going to locate into there and make sure this all tightens up nice to spec. So with your tail shaft, from your factory bolts, they've got a machine flat on the bolt head here. As we're using a cap screw, we've gone ahead and machined the nut to suit that exact same flat. So that locates up into the backside of your pinion yoke, and everything tightens up without having to use a spanner and that sort of thing. And it's really good for retaining that nut in there in case they were to ever come loose or something like that. But it's also, again, we're making sure we're using Loctite on all those threads. So with your tail shaft, it's a lot easier to do it in two-wheel drive, and that way you can get your bolts just tightened up until the tail shaft starts rotating on each one. Then once you've done that, and then you've got the rest of the stuff assembled under the car and torqued to spec, put the car into full drive, jump back under, and you can torque these up to the actual spec that you need that's obviously shown on screen now. And that's why it's all good. But yeah, whilst you're under here, to make it easy for yourself to just rotate that shaft, keep it in two-wheel drive, have those bolts all just nice and torqued up to, well, not torqued up, but all just tightened up to hold the shaft there essentially. And then you can jump back under and tighten it up once you've got it in full drive. Now everything under here has all been torqued up to spec. We can reinstall the factory crossmember, obviously just reversing the steps at the start of removing that. We're going to get that one put back in. Once you get everything that installed, torque back up. Going to jump under once it's in full drive, torque that tail shaft back up. Then you can just install your factory bash plates or any bash plates you've got. You're good to hit the road.